So Roland, if you can go ahead and push record, I'd appreciate that. Okay, and then let me just see if anyone's in the waiting room. No. Okay, so today's session will take us up until 7:30 this evening, and we'll try and be as prompt as we can. The agenda is as follows. I'm going to introduce myself officially, and then we're going to have a welcome by your ward councillor, Mikhail Manuel. And then we're going to chat a little bit about what the integrated development plan is. We'll take some questions. We'll chat about how you can contribute to the IDP. We'll have another set of sessions around actual contributions and chatting a little bit more substantively about that. And then we'll talk about next steps. So that's the agenda that you can see in front of you. And what I do want to do is just remind you that the session is being recorded and that you can use the chat bar to make comments and to ask questions. And as far as possible, between myself and the councillor and Roland, who is assisting me from a tech point of view, we'll try and answer as many of those questions during the session as we can, or we'll answer them offline if we feel like it is appropriate. So you have a session of questions and a session to add some contributions, and in between that, myself and the councillor will be making some presentations. Okay, so just in terms of housekeeping, what I do want to do is just please ask that during the course of the session that we see this presentation and this series of sessions for what they are, which is a community building effort in order to not only improve and build towards a city and a ward that we are proud of, but we will do so together in a way that is kind and respectful. So I'll just ask as we go to just be as kind and respectful as you can, and I'll be chairing the meeting to try and assist us to do that. Okay, so this is a great time to remind everyone to please put your microphone on mute. Doug, I'm going to mute you if you don't mind. And Kathy, Eric, apologies. So one of those things is just not speaking while somebody else is speaking. So I'm going to ask you to be on mute. And then the other thing is when we do have contributions, we'll try and keep them brief enough to give everyone a chance to talk. Okay, so kicking off, I think now that the housekeeping is out of the way, I'm going to officially introduce myself. My name is Kirsten Wilkins. I am the Managing Director of Open Streets Cape Town. Open Streets Cape Town is a not-for-profit organization that has been working in Cape Town for almost 10 years now, it's almost our birthday, to try and work together to bring local governments and decision makers together with an active citizenry in order to improve and transform our city to be more people-oriented, just and sustainable. And so this is very much in our wheelhouse, in that we are bringing together and encouraging people to really take ownership of creating positive and transformed spaces, doing so with your local government representative, newly elected ward councillor. So very briefly, we have a very long history of assisting communities to come together and to try and help in a translatory role, to try and make sense of some of the more complex city policy or ways in which urban systems are at present, in order that the lived experiences of people can improve, because we're facilitating kind of brushing up the knots, clearing away some of what seems to be red tape, and just helping people to really get engaged and be active in making better cities. So that's me briefly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to now hand over to Councilor Mikhail Manuel, who we are partnering with for this session. And I'm going to ask him to set the scene of why it is that we're here and why it is that we're discussing contributions to the integrated development plan. So I'm going to press stop share here so you can see his face. And Mikhail, I'm going to hand over to you and give you about 10 minutes if you need to introduce not only why we're here, but also maybe yourself, if some people are new to not having met you since your election. So Mikhail, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Great. Thank you so much, Kirsten, and thanks everyone for joining this evening. I'm really excited for this because I have thought about this for quite some time. And when Open Streets approached me with doing a slightly more collaborative planning process for this IDP and for the ward in general, it really was up the alley of what I think are some of the opportunities that we have in Ward 59. So basically, in Cape Town in general, I think we have a unique opportunity to be able to do government in a lot more of a collaborative way, to have more transparency, so the residents feel like they're part of the process, and for there to actually be more accountability, where residents feel like they have something that they can actually hold the ward councillor to account for. And that, together with what normally happens in a ward over a 5-year period, is why I was keen to do this exercise. We do the introduction and then the in-person neighborhood sessions. Normally what happens is, in year 2 or year 3, or basically just on an ad hoc basis, residents or civics request various things because they've noticed issues, or because something age old has always been around, but they've never kind of known who the councillor is. And then when those requests come through, if they are small, it's perhaps easy to deal with them. But if they are bigger, something like safety, for example, or something like our what's it called, streetlights issue that's happening right now, it takes a bit longer to be able to actually, sorry, forgive me, Kirsten,
Yeah.
Nico has asked about sound. Can you guys hear me? Okay, fine.
I can hear you.
All right. Thanks, Nico and Kirsten. So it takes a bit longer to be able to solve those problems, when in actual fact, if we preempt the whole planning and budgeting process, and we create a bit of a to-do list for ourselves as residents and as the ward councillor, then I can go to the sub-council manager and I can say, well, these are the things that we want to do. How much of this can we get into the big IDP budget? How much of this can we get into the line department's budget? How much of this stuff must I take from my ward allocation, or leave a bit of the ward allocation to kind of do touch-ups here and there? Because yes, we will only discover some things 2 or 3 years in. And how much of this can I go look for more creative sources of funding? And so that really empowers me as the ward councillor to be able to actually go and look for the funding to solve problems, because I have a to-do list. And it empowers you as the residents, because you have something to say in 5 years' time. Well, you promised to be able to fix the street lights, and what did you do to actually get funding for that? I think that this type of process and that type of a sort of framework for a 5-year term is an indication of a maturing democracy. And I think that because of that, we actually have a really solid opportunity to be able to lead the whole city and basically show the city that we can do these planning processes or resident and ward council engagement in a much more mature, collaborative, positive, and effective and meaningful way. So that's the hope behind all of this. That as residents, as we discuss these issues in the in-person sessions, we've planned maps and I assume whiteboards and like that, but basically exercises to help us to tease out what the different challenges are and how they all fit together. Because there is only, X amount of money. There's only so much time and X amount of money. And as I'm sure you are all aware, the city, as do I, as do you in your households, we all have competing interests on our budgets. And so, where one might request a new park and another one might request new streetlights, somehow you have to find that compromise. And having residents and civics and myself as the ward councillor all grapple with that together actually helps the ward and the city to be run in a more stable and effective way, because we've collaborated through the whole process. Now, of course, not everyone's going to be able to join these sessions, so not everyone will know. But what I certainly hope to convey to yourselves that are here and to those that are able to attend our in-person sessions, that I am here is that I'm willing to engage, I'm willing to be disagreed with, I'm willing to be held accountable, I'm willing to take on ideas, and I'm willing to go and actually find the funds to do stuff and argue for the ideas that you think are correct when it comes to, you know, when we write our bylaws or our policies, etc., or when we're in council. So this is really just, you know, me trying to kind of create a more collaborative space where we as residents and the council and as civics kind of take hands together to try and figure out, you know, what we do where. And then I will then take responsibility to go to the sub-council manager and figure out what can we do, and I will feed back to you as well. You'll be able to hold me accountable. I'll be able to go and advocate for what, you know, what we believe are the right solutions for our area. And then hopefully we'll actually grow a bigger culture in the city as a whole of this type of collaboration. So that's just my short input, Kirsten, to frame the evening and the sessions to follow in the next few days. But just thank you very much to everyone again for joining and for giving all of your input a bit later. Thanks.
Thanks, Mikhail. I really appreciate that, and that sort of really framed, I think, a lot of what we are, certainly me as a resident, sort of hope from one of our ward councils is really a sort of a back and forth session and a really collaborative, open discussion around how it is that our lived experiences turn into city policy and funded efforts and programs to help to support the city longer term. So the reason that this session has really come to be is because last week, I think it was last week now, the City of Cape Town opened the comment period for the creation and the putting together of the integrated development framework. And so what I want to do now for the next 3 or 4 minutes with a series of, I managed to get it down to 3 slides, is I want to share with you what the IDP is, why it's important, and perhaps I think it would be helpful for residents and folks in the session to then just be able to start differentiating between ideas and programs and solutions that you might have that might be very, very specific to your ward or even to your street, separate from perhaps issues that are systemic to the city, which a document or policy vehicle like the Integrated Development Plan would really be a perfect place to hold. So I'm going to chat a little bit about what the IDP is, and then I'm going to give you a sense of what those timelines are for how to contribute. And then after that, we're going to open up for some questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to sharing the screen here. Okay, and for those of you who've just joined, this is our agenda. We are about to head into what is the Integrated Development Plan. Please remember to use the chat bar and be as lively and kind as you can. Okay, so I think what's worth saying, sorry, I didn't say this in my introduction, but by profession, I'm an urban designer and architect, and so this is very much something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm hoping that some of that passion can help to translate this very weighty document into something that you will feel equally enthusiastic about once we're done. So the Integrated Development Plan, I think there's 3 things that I want to mention about it, which is firstly, it's a statutory planning mechanism. So it's required by law, and because it's required by law, it has a whole range of tick boxes that need to be satisfied, not only into what it contains, but also in the process in which it is approved. Even the process to create it had to be approved in council. So it really is very regulated and very important from that point of view, in that it also needs to be aligned with policies across different spheres of government. So if you have a look in a little bit more detail at the process and the way in which it's compiled, it does circulate through both provincial government and some national government oversight. So the second thing that's really important about the IDP is, it's just like, how would you explain it to somebody who's never heard of it? And it really is simply this. The IDP guides the spending, the focus, and the priorities for the city for the next 5-year term. And I think in the lead up to elections, we heard a lot about how important it is to hold those who've been elected to represent you to account. This one business plan, if you like, for the city is really concurrent with the election term. And so it's a very important vehicle for people who are elected to government to be able to see the fruit of their work, but also for citizens to really contribute to an accountability mechanism that's quite focused and relatively tangible. And then the third point is about the IDP that I feel very strongly about personally, is how important it is for us to understand that this plan of what the city could be and how it will be mechanized in the next 5 years is attached to the city budget, as Mikhail has mentioned, which is a slightly separate discussion in and of itself, but the city budget, and it's also aligned with a very important piece of legislation that guides the way that our city evolves, and that's called the Municipal Spatial Development Framework, or the MSDF, which is really a spatial implementation plan that has layers and sort of cascades to quite a localized precinct level in terms of where things are, what things are important, where people move, So that's the spatial plan and that financial plan both underpin and support this very important sort of business plan visioning document for the city for the next 5 years. So really the question that the IDP answers is, what is local government going to do with what it has to create the city that we need? And that really is the heart of it as I understand it. Now this graphic I sort of spliced together from IDP itself, and just a little bit of graphics to help us to understand the structure of the IDP. So it's an approximately 150 to 170 page document, excluding the budgets and annexes. And it really is, the way in which it's structured is very, very important for us to understand if we're going to contribute effectively to its reimagining for the next 5-year term. Now, as an urbanist and somebody who works with communities, my worry is that very important real life, everyday experiences that you have as a citizen of the city of Cape Town, when you apply those and submit those to the IDP as ideas or issues or something that just makes you really angry, what worries me is that those comments, somebody is not on mute, is that those comments might be dismissed as anecdotal or not have the important gravitas that they should in terms of making the city what you need it to be. So I'm going to stop there and quickly mute whoever is having dinner. Rosemary. Okay. So I'm just going to ask if you can be on mute. I'd really, really appreciate it. Just so that everyone has a chance to hear what's being said. So Jane, sorry, I'm going to mute you, and iPhone, sorry, I'm going to mute you. Okay, apologies for that. Okay, so what's very important for us is to make sure that the comments that we have and the ideas that we have and the things we feel passionate about can get applied into the structure of the IDP, and that your comments can have the gravitas that they need to have. So what and so when you have a comment or you have an idea or something that's really you feel passionate about, we can try and steer those into one of these buckets of the structure of the IDP so that we can talk to the IDP in the right place. Okay, so the IDP really is composed of a cascade of ideas that go from the strategic, so we're reading the slide from left to right, from strategic to implementation. So you'll see starting from the left, the IDP starts with a vision statement, quite a lovely narrative actually. If you read it, you feel very proud to be Cape Townian. How should the city look? How should it feel? I want to feel proud of my city. I want to feel safe. I want a place where my kids can grow up and thrive. So it's very much a visioning statement, and I encourage you to read that and feel really optimistic. But also know that that is a portion that you can contribute to. You can contribute to how that narrative is shaped. The second portion then takes that vision towards implementation. It says, so we have this broader narrative of how we want to feel about the city and how to be. How do we break that down? And so there are 5 strategic pillars that the IDP is then kind of broken down into. And so where the vision might say, I really want to see where I can feel safe, but the responding pillar is a caring city. And so these 5 pillars have come from the previous IDP. They seem to really sort of structure the way that people think and feel about ideas. And so I expect that these pillars will remain largely the same going into the next IDP, although please feel free to add another pillar if you think that is a comment that you'd like to make. For me personally, I feel that a justice narrative or a justice pillar might be an important addition. Pillar would be important. Okay, now what happens in the IDP then is that those pillars are then translated into something more towards implementation. And currently there are 11 objectives, strategic objectives, that you can see from this graphic speak to more than one pillar. And so an example would be a caring city as a pillar has one of the objectives is excellence in basic service delivery. So if you do care, everyone will have access to dignified service delivery, water, sanitation, etc. And further cascading from those objectives, then you find the plans and programs that the city then puts into place. And those are the high level plans and programs are outlined in the IDP. So for example, with the objective being leveraging technology for progress, which on this plan is objective number 2, the responding project and program would be the rollout of broadband and fiber in communities that may or may not have had adequate internet access previously. So you can see that there's this cascade structure. And when you respond to the IDP, I want to encourage you to have a project or plan that you may already have in your mind and see how that cascades up into the vision. See if you can add a comment to the objectives and a comment to the pillars and even a comment to the vision to make sure that your idea, when it's submitted and reviewed, has the gravitas that it needs to have. So it's very important that we understand the structure because we're commenting on this document with the structure that it has. And so I'm hoping that sort of covers that in brief. We can definitely come back for questions, but I want to just mention how that cascade happens. Oftentimes at a ward level, you'll find a lot of engagement around the projects and programs section, what would then turn into an IDP comment, but it is really, really important for us to see it as a whole. Now, on the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see these 3 yellow blocks that I've put in here, and they're very important to me because I think that without understanding these 3 blocks, we might be setting ourselves up for a missed opportunity. And so there's an opportunity to comment on the city budget, and there is an opportunity to comment on the MSDF, which is the spatial priorities. But importantly, during this phase of this comment period, you have the opportunity to also comment on the corporate scorecard. So essentially, how do we measure whether or not those projects and programs were successful? So for example, in creating a caring city, the objective is safe communities as one of those 11 objectives. And the project and program is implementation and installation of CCTV cameras. So that's a great project. But the measurable or the scorecard is how many new neighborhoods received CCTV camera access, and that's measurable. So if you're creating or you're suggesting a project or a program that you're feeling really passionate about, and you're locating it in the structure of the IDP, be sure to give some suggestions as to how that would be measured. Because I think we all know by now that the way that you measure something and the way that you report on something has a huge impact on the way that you implement that. And I think that if we look at the corporate scorecard and how to create KPIs and give suggestions around those, we really will have added a lot of value to how does the city can improve, but also how we can keep officials and those elected to government accountable for the work that they've created. Okay, so that is the IDP in short. What is important to note is that this scary slide, which I really don't expect anyone to read, really is something that I pulled it out of the planning documentation. And these are the tick boxes that need to be made and the time frame in which they need to be made in order for the IDP to be signed off as a statutory document. I see there are a lot of check boxes, and they sure are. But in terms of timeline, how that impacts us is over here. So this will be my last slide, and then we're going to open up to some questions. So currently we're over here. We're in this facilitation week with the councillor to try and just get people enthusiastic about commenting and to elicit some comments at a neighbourhood level. This comment period closes on the 7th of January, which really is a very short period of time for any comment period in my experience, and it is over the festive season. So we really want to sort of kind of put it into the wheel to make sure that we don't miss this opportunity, because the next timeline or deadline in this process is at the end of February. The draft IDP will be ready. So all of our comments and all of the things that people submit in this first session will be collated, but attached to that will be the city budget. And that budget needs to be complete in order to comply with the statutory timelines that was in that last overly complicated slide. So the next opportunity that you have to comment, because this whole IDP process, where there is a second phase, that is between March and April, a second phase. But essentially what you'll be commenting on is a collation of items received and long-term projects that are just rolling over, and a budget that is really being considered. And so to a large degree, that second comment period is very much a critique of a document that's ready to be finalized. So my encouragement for you today is to use this opportunity now. The window, short as it is, to comment in a flamboyant and optimistic and enthusiastic fashion, so that those ideas can be considered when the budget is created. So that when we get to that second phase, which is more of a critique phase, I assume that it will be a little bit less likely that kind of big ideas and more important ideas would suddenly kind of get slipped in. So I really think it's important to just understand the timeline that we have, and that in May we will see a final IDP document, and that's what we will have for the next 5 years. There are annual reviews and a period and an opportunity to amend the IDP as we go, but for the most part, what gets set in the next couple of months really is the development trajectory for cities that we have an opportunity to participate in. Okay, that was a lot of information, and I appreciate that if you're new to this, there might be some questions. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into a question phase, and I'm hoping going to be able to take anywhere from sort of 4 to 5 questions or comments or statements. I'm not going to be too stressed about kind of what comes up, but I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. So if you can use the raise hand function on your bottom bar, that would be great, and I'll come to you and ask you to state your question. Or if you would rather not speak out loud, you're welcome to put your question in the comment bar, and Roland will help me to triage those and make sure that your voice is heard. So in terms of where we are now in our session, the IDP, we sort of stated why that's important. Councilor Mikhail Manuel has sort of said how he's really kind of enthusiastic and wanting to partner with the community of Ward 59 to not only comment on the IDP, but also to find out what all those other issues are, so that we can move together into a place where your lived experience is improved, because you are both represented and also engaging in the policies that shape the city. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch off share screen, and we are going to see who has a question. So questions can be anything from around timeline. I'm going to touch on how you can contribute and give you some really good tips and tricks on that. But at this stage, if a question, I'm very, very happy to have that either spoken or you're welcome to pop that in the chat bar. Don't be shy. All right, Eric is clapping. Thank you, Eric. That's awesome. Clapping counts. I'm going to let Carolyn. Okay, I have Dave right. Dave, if you would like to ask a question, you can go ahead. Oh, questions can relate to timeline milestones or anything that you have questions about. If I am going to cover something in the next 2 or 3 slides to come, I'll let you know. But if you have something burning, please hand it to us and we will unburn it for you. Dave, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kirsten. Can I just say that I think this is a great initiative and it's something well with that you're doing, which is really good. There is one big problem that I think we have with the planning process in the city, and that is we don't know where the city's going in 20 years. So the 5-year plan is great because it puts us on a path and it fits in with the voting cycle, if I can put it like that. But businesses tend to have 20-year plans rather than, or 10-year plans at least, not 5-year plans. So that's the one point that I would just make, is that I think the vision is nice, but where do we want to be in 20 years as a city? I think would be a really helpful thing to do, which is not part of this process, I accept, but maybe Councilor Manuel can take that forward and ask the city to do something about that. The second thing the question I'd like to ask is, do we need to be cognizant of the long-term projects which are going to be rolled over from the last IDP into this IDP? Should we be aware of those in terms of thinking about what else we need to bring to the party? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Carolyn, I'm going to get to, if you have a question, I'm going to come back to that in a second. I think I want to just see if we can address Dave's 2 questions. Dave, I'm going to ask Mikhail to come in on the 20-year plan question, which is an excellent observation. I had a discussion with the mayor recently about his announcement around creating a future planning strategy team, where I think he's thinking along the same lines as we actually need to think a lot further ahead and actually get the minds together to think about those issues. So I don't know, Mikhail, do you want to maybe just touch on that as far as you know in terms of future planning?
Yeah, thank you, Kirsten. I'll be quite brief. I actually think that you are correct, Dave. I don't know of a citywide future plan. Maybe there is one and I'm just not aware of it. I am aware though of 2 specific ones. One is for transport, which is the 2035 plan or something like that, 2032. And the other one is around water and actually just becoming a water resilient city. And I think that aims at 2040, if I stand to be corrected. So I think that within the directorates, there are perhaps those, but I'm not aware of one that covers the whole city. I can ask the question and find out. And if there is, I agree with you. We do need to be cognizant of it. And then in terms of rollover projects, yes, I agree. We do need to keep that in mind. Kirsten and I did actually talk quite at length about how this IDP process or this participation that we're doing right now is not a standalone thing. We're not starting on a blank slate. But inevitably, any planning always happens a few years in advance. And so this process is still really valuable to actually make sure that we shift the city in the direction which we think is the correct sort of things to be doing. And that really, it comes out with the way that you plan the first year of your IDP and the second year, et cetera, what projects, what big projects come along in that 5-year period, or from this planning at least. So that's sort of my input. I hope that answers some part of your question.
Thanks, Mikhail. That's great, and you got a thumbs up from Dave. Yeah, that's a really, really important question, and I think balancing that kind of the everyday need with a long-term plan is important. One of the processes that Open Streets Cape Town is involved in is providing comments on the Comprehensive Integrated Transport Plan, which I think is a 30-year term to it. So there certainly are plans and policies that are in the works, which the IDP, again, as a statutory, does need to align with policies that already have a degree of decision-making around them. So I certainly hope somebody has oversight of all of these things, but it does take an extraordinary amount of effort to keep your eye on the ball. So I think what I want to do is I want to just touch on a question that Irvine has, or a statement that Irvine has said in the chat bar that echoes that, which is that just that sense of feeling in a crisis, that many businesses can't plan beyond a 12-year period even. So I think that is an immediacy of planning and just how incredibly difficult it is for businesses and people at this stage is quite important to consider as well. So Mikhail, I would think that from a ward point of view, that there would be a lot of opportunity to implement longer term, shorter term crisis management plans, as well as being cognizant of long-term plans. Okay, so I've got a hand. Eric, I saw a hand go up and then go down. Let me know how you feel about putting it up again. But for now, I'm going to go to Rudy. Rudy Buerta has a question. Rudy, the floor is yours.
Hi, Kirsten. Thanks for this opportunity. And these kind of participatory design processes are always great, especially on a neighborhood level. I agree with Dave. As a city, we've focused more on TOD design and integrated transport, and we've gotten quite a bit away about more kind of place making, street quality, those kind of environments. So I think my question is predominantly, yes, we do need a vision for the ward, and a longer term vision that do transcend the 5 years. I know there's a lot of TOD stuff in terms of Lansdowne out and IRT proposed things. So there's a lot of questions about some of those aspects, but I think the question is really, what kind of budget are we talking about really on a yearly basis for the ward? Because I think the suggestions needs to kind of fit the budget. And are there special project budgets? I know there's neighborhood grants and all kinds of other things applicable. But I think it's also maybe important to understand, what kind of comments are we talking about? Potholes, street lighting, kind of quality of certain areas, the taxi ranks where there's hotspots, certain street and security areas, or are we talking about larger projects over a longer period of time that budget can start being allocated to? So it's more to understand, what is the scale of the budget and the scale of things that we can dream for, and what we can actually implement now.
Great, thank you for that, Rudy. Mikhail, I know we had an offline conversation about this earlier in the week, so I don't know if you want to maybe just chat about those budget buckets, give everyone a sense of where the opportunities are.
Yeah, thank you. A very good question, Rudy. I really appreciate that a lot. So I think there are basically four that you can categorize the pools of money into four buckets, as Kirsten called it. The first is sort of big citywide type projects, where the idea for those types of projects really comes from this IDP process. So for example, the mayor last week, Thursday, I think, in our council meeting, spoke about how there's really a significant underspend when it comes to capital infrastructure. And that is, to a large degree, is why we have all of this, these sewage spills that we see happening. And I know already, for example, that in the Claremont CBD, on which day was it now? I think it was on Monday, not this week. Maybe it was Friday last week, I forget the day. But there was actually a sewage spill inside the Pick and Pay of Montclair building, and that's because quite a big section of the pipeline in Claremont CBD was blocked up. And it was blocked up because of fat and because of paper towels, so toilet paper. Now, what's interesting is that in that Claremont CBD area, you've had those huge Rest Common buildings going up, a whole bunch more office complexes, et cetera, going up, all high rises, yet the infrastructure hasn't changed. So being able to fund that type of infrastructure improvements will come from what I'm calling IDP budget. It's this big 5-year, 10-year planning sort of stuff that the city does. Then the next one is just where I can take items to the sub-council manager. And that goes to line departments. I'm calling that the line department budget. And that's for smaller things. So I can basically go to the sub-council manager and say, look, I've done an analysis and 40% of all the streets in Ward 59 have lighting problems. And we know that lighting is an issue at night. So what we need to do is actually replace all the light bulbs in the Ward 59 area. That amount of money, it ranges between, I think it was 1 and 4 million rand. And that will then go to a line department. A line department will add it onto their sort of plan and their budget cycle, and it'll get done. Then the next one is just ward allocation. Ward allocation is funds that I have a complete authority over. It's R1 million, it's a year on year, so it's 5 million rand over the course of that 5 years. And it's for capital infrastructure projects, which are kind of like little touch-ups. So for example, I had a chat the other day with our current, group of our current sort of officials that help to implement those things. And some of the things that I personally am interested in is cycle lanes. I want to see more cycle lanes across Ward 59. I want to see more cycling lock-up infrastructure. That type of smaller projects ranging between 0 and R1 million can come out of that budget. And then the last one is, let's say we get what's it called? The World Bank comes along and says we really want to fund a minibus taxi innovation. We really want to fund something about homelessness or something about climate change or whatever, and it's unexpected, unplanned, massive amounts of money. The way that we access all of that is not necessarily, we don't have to think about what that costs and whether or not it's actually possible. I will take the information of what we want to see happening and go to the sub-council manager and have 1 or 2 or 3 meetings to actually kind of debate with him and wrestle about where that money can come out of. Where money can come out of for those items. And I will then feed back to say, this is possible, this is not possible. So really just as much transparency as is available to kind of make sure you understand towards the end of this whole process, what things cost and where it can happen. Hope that answers your question.
All right, thumbs up from Rudy. Thanks, Rudy. I think, what I'd love for us when we have an opportunity to meet again in March to do the critique of the work, to be able to look at the budget and some of those projects aligned and see where it is we can add more value and work together in that way. I think that'll be a good place to come back to that question. Okay, so I've got time for one more question, and then we're going to go to how it is that we contribute to the IDP. I'm just going to see, Henk, I see your hand up. I don't see any other hands that I might have missed. Apologies if I have. Henk, the floor is yours.
Okay, I want to talk about some basic questions. We've come out of a system that we've inherited, a spatial plan, which means big distances between where people live and where businesses. And the whole thing was focused on business. And you didn't care how long or how much time, how much money, labor and management spend to get to the business. Now, all over the world is changing. The world is putting much more emphasis on individuals, quality of life, and also minimizing the time they spend in traveling and minimize the amount of they spend in terms of cost. Now, if you look at what's been happening with the Paris Climate Accord, as well as COP26, we know we've got a major problem coming down the track, and that is global warming. So the emphasis should be on reducing the greenhouse gases, that means transport and what have you. And the philosophy is coming through, and that has also been confirmed with the C40 Mayors agenda, to which Cape Town is a signatory. And that concept is the 15-minute city, where your social activities and your business is within 15 minutes or cycle time of your home. So you minimize the cost, you minimize the time to give you more quality time with your family. Now, I know Cape Town is a signatory to that. I don't know how Cape Town is interpreting that. And I agree with Dave, it's no good working with a time horizon of 5 years. It's best that you work with the Paris Accord, 30 years time horizon. And I'd like to know, how are we going to get there? Is that Cape Town's intention, or is that not being considered because it's too different and it's going to be too difficult to sell to people?
Thanks, Henk. That's really great. I almost want to kind of transcribe that for you so that you can contribute that as a comment. I'm going to, Mikhail, with your permission, I'm going to do a quick response to that, only in that I was in a meeting with the City of Cape Town today that covered a lot of what you've explained and a lot of the concerns that you've had. And the presentation that I was in was on the results on a carbon emissions study looking at various departments in the city and how it is that they are in their work and in what they plan, how they need to reduce carbon emissions, and all of the markers were those documents and those sessions that you've spoken about. So C40, the Paris Accord, SDGs that point to 2050 as a marker. So the City of Cape Town's Climate Action Plan, which is relatively new, I think the ink is still drying on that one, speaks to a lot of that. So for me, as a kind of the climate activist in me, feels like a lot of those things are being spoken about. But where I think our work here together can be important is for us to help to bring those high level documents, which can just turn into these just talk shops forever, into ward specific actions and ward specific projects. And I think folks like yourself and I can hear Rudy also has quite a lot of experience in kind of spatial planning to try and make sure that we have those local area implementation projects that talk to those and help to bring that policy down is going to be really critical. Because I hear the sound coming from the city and I see those policies, but until they're turning it into behavior change at a local level, it really, frankly, I don't think will mean much. So Henk, if I can encourage you in this process to see where those opportunities are, those comments that you could give to make that translation would be great. And a 15-minute city concept is spot on. That is a precinct level expression of low carbon, smart, climate active, climate change mechanisms that come together to make places that are walkable and reduce carbon emissions. So I really, really want us to come back to that, almost like I'm going to email you about it to try and encourage us to hit this hard. We don't have more time to talk about it. We've got like 5 years max. So something I feel very passionate about. So thank you very much for that, Henk. I'm hoping that answers your question. I'd love to email you some of those documents so you can have a look at them and see where the city's at from a policy point of view to talk to that more substantively, if that's okay. All right. So if everyone's okay with us moving along, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just segue from feeling really like passionate about what Henk has mentioned into how it is that we translate these things into a substantive comment for the IDP so that all of these good ideas and this can really move into something that can mechanize a plan for the city. If you do have further questions, please pop them in the chat bar and we'll try and get back to them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to share screen and we're going to look a little bit at the tools that you can use to engage with the IDP. So, all right. Okay, let me just make sure that this is out of the way. All right. So in order for us to contribute to the IDP substantively, the first thing that I want to say is that both between Councilor Manuel and myself, we are both using the city's vehicle, if you like, to contribute comments to the IDP. Please don't send me something and think that I'm going to send it along to the city. That would be not helping. That would be the definition of not helping. What is very important is for us to use, and for us as Open Streets and the councillor, is to move the citizens towards the official process of submissions so that everything that's submitted can be considered equally and with the gravitas that it deserves. So these are your options in terms of submitting comments. You can do one or all of them. The first is to email your submission through to the City of Cape Town. Now, Roland, my very amazing tech assistant today, is going to be posting that email address in the chat bar now. I will send it along with further documentation later, but just if you're feeling really passionate about that now, Roland is going to pop that in the chat bar. You can email submissions. Open Streets Cape Town will be submitting an email submission via that method, as will the ward councillor, and everyone has the opportunity to do so. The second way to contribute is by completing the online survey. So the City of Cape Town has a survey portal, which as far as I know, you can only do once, so give it your best shot. And Roland is going to pop that survey link into the chat bar now. That guides you a little bit more in terms of answering some questions that I think the city has, as every survey is set up to answer specific questions. That survey is important to take a look at, so please utilize that as a method. The third method is there's a customer portal, which is quite a new addition to the public participation mechanisms of the city. It requires you to log in. So you need to do a little bit of admin work to have login details. And more than that, I don't know, because I haven't actually had the opportunity to go grovel around and see what is involved there. But it certainly is a slightly more customer-centric engagement portal for you to submit comments. So you can either email, complete the online IDP website, which Roland will also. What we are going to be doing is assisting you to make the best submission possible. And so we're not taking the place of submitting. We're not in any way mandated by the city to take in your submissions. That's not our role. Our role is to enthuse you, to get a fire lit, and so we can all make submissions. And the reason that's important is this. Tips to remember. If as Open Streets, or even as the councillor, if I was to gather in all of your comments and make one beautiful submission in pink and green and make it pop and look lovely, that would be counted simply as one submission. A good submission, I would hope, but one submission. And I really want us to steer clear of falling into that trap. I want to encourage every person here to submit a comment through one of those portals, so that when the city assesses what it is that Ward 59 or any other ward you may be involved in, what that ward needs, they will see a list of hundreds of comments saying street lights, street lights, street lights, street lights, street lights, or whatever it is that comes up as an issue in the ward, because that way those comments will have more gravitas. It's just the way that the city works, and I mean no harm by pointing that out as a tip, but please don't fall into the trap of collating all of your comments with a great big group of people into one and thinking that you've done yourself good. Please submit as many individual responses as you can. So with that in mind, we will be collating comments and ideas from these sessions and making those available documents to you, so that when you make a submission as an individual, as a business, or as a family, or as a fictional title, however you want to do that, you will have all of what we've spoken about to copy and paste, to kind of shuffle it around, and you'll have that information at your fingertips. But I still need you as an individual to make that submission so that the amount of input that the city gets is equal to the amount of effort that we've taken in these sessions to facilitate you. I hope this makes a lot of sense. It's a really, if that's the only thing you remember from this evening, I would like it to be that. Please individually submit comments, and we will do our best to help you to make that comment relevant, have the gravitas it needs, and to try and distinguish between all of the terminology and jargon that you might come across. So our next session will be on the 14th of December in this digital town hall. And by the 14th of December, we'll have, that's this time next week, we'll have that baseline document for you to take pieces from and to use to construct your submission. We'll have a template submission. We'll do everything we can to make it simpler for you to pop that in your email and send it off, or to do that online submission. So I hope that makes sense. I'm just going to quickly see here. Thank you so much for all the comments in the chat bar. I'm just quickly checking on those. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to shift gears a little bit and chat a little bit about some of the contributions that people would like to make. So what I would like to do is I would like for us to have a session, a session of maybe 5 or 6 kind of hands up and comments, where we can chat about issues that we really think are important to address in Ward 59 for the IDP. And what Mikhail and I will do is try and respond and to try and assist to not only show everyone in the group how we can try and kind of complete that submission so it has that gravitas that we're talking about, but also it'll be a great place for us to start sharing submissions and seeing that we're all kind of on the same page or helping us each other to understand what some of these issues are. I would think that these would be broader issues where at a neighborhood level, when we meet further on this week, we might talk about things that are a bit more street specific. But I would like for us to move into discussion session time now where we can raise some of the issues and some of the solutions and project ideas that could be IDP submissions to get the ball rolling. So I'm going to press stop share here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly check in with Mikhail. Mikhail, are you happy with where we're at and that we shift into starting to just chat about and receive issues and comments around the IDP? Okay, cool. So I'm going to say thanks to Roland for all his efforts and his messages. And then I'm going to see if anyone has hand up. The question is, the burning issue that you would like to see in the IDP as it relates to Ward 59, potentially specifically, is what? I'd like to throw some ideas together and start seeing what those are for Ward 59. If this is your only opportunity to engage with the IDP and you just don't have time after this, please say something so that we can raise it and get stuck in. So what I'm going to do just in terms of just being kind to everyone and respectful and having enough people speaking, I'm going to try and keep everyone to about a 2-minute statement or question or rant if it's burning. It's a safe space for you to just be annoyed. It's fine. Okay, so Irvine, I'm going to ask you to get us started. I see your hand is up. The floor is yours.
Irvine? Hello, I was on mute.
Oh,
quote of 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, for a long time, Cape Town has had all sorts of good policies, but they are undone by, I don't know what, they're not implemented. I mean, surely, for example, we shouldn't even be having conversations about where is the budget to fix the street lamps, because surely there's a policy to have street lights in the whole city. Surely we shouldn't be discussing about buses and trains because they are all in any kind of normal city policy. It wouldn't matter what kind of government we had. The basics would be we should have street lights, safety, and public transport. And this isn't really even part of an integrated development plan. We don't need to develop those things. We need to fix what we've got already. And I also feel a bit awkward about Ward 59 asking for extra money for anything, because we've got it all. You know, there are so many other wards that are so much worse off. In a small, selfish way, I moved to Rondebosch and I thought it was going to be wonderful. And to be honest, it's a bit tatty and a bit rubbish compared to Pinelands. But those and my girls, my daughters who are now aged 19 and 20, can't walk down to Rondebosch Main Road anymore because they get harassed. But my problems are minor. It's it's the domestic worker who takes 3 hours to get in from Khayelitsha because there's no public transport except taxis. It's a friend of mine who lives in Guguletu who has to find accommodation on this side because she now has an evening job, but she can't take an Uber home anymore because the taxi drivers are confiscating the Ubers. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, so yes, these long-term policies should not be lost sight of. But my goodness, we've got incredible problems just to get back to where we were 5 years ago. And that's what I'm passionate about. A side passion is, it would be really great if the bike lanes around my house didn't have homeless people living in them. But again, that's not part of the bigger problem. I mean, it's a symptom of the bigger problem. That's my gist.
Thank you very much, Johan. Silence misses you, my friend. It does. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I don't want to add anything to what you said. I think it resonates with me, and I think that's very, very beautifully put. And yeah, that's excellent. Thank you so much. Caroline, I'm going to throw hands up. I'm going to ask you to have the floor for 2 minutes.
Hi, thanks so much, Kirsten. I just want to pick up on what Irvine's been speaking about. It's something that I've thought about for a while. I too feel that we live in an overserviced area. And when there's water leak and you make a call, somebody, the city council is here within 2 hours, sometimes even less. And I have often thought about how Rosebank, I mean, I live in Rosebank, that part of Ward 59, how we, and the idea of wards twinning, so that we twin with, say, an area in, I drive past Dunoon every day, and I'm absolutely horrified by what I observe and see there. And I often just have thought about how, if a service is delivered to Rosebank, that the same service is delivered to another area. Because we know that rubbish is never collected from Dunoon. There are no street lights. Nothing. The water leaks are there. So if a water leak is fixed in Rosebank, a water leak is fixed in Dunoon. That there's some kind of, that that all of these sort of wealthy suburbs that we live in are somehow twinned with less privileged, well, let's call it very underprivileged areas. So that was the first. That was the first thought that I had. There's another thought that I've had, and that it's particularly around residents taking responsibility for keeping their areas clean. And when rubbish is never collected, it's just too burdensome to even think about trying to clean up around yourself. And I think that this is, when, again, I look at Dunoon, the city council comes in and cleans up, and it's all put into blue bags, and then the blue bags are never removed. And you drive past there 3 days later, and the blue bags have been ripped open by dogs or rats or whatever, and all the rubbish is spewed back again. So there's something, and something that the area that, Rosebank that we live in, I mean, the residents are absolutely remarkable in, particularly before the LMRID. The residents were really responsible for keeping this area incredibly clean, beautiful, plantings, things, all sorts of things were happening. And I wonder if there isn't some way of creating neighborhood competitions, that the city could actually run neighborhood competitions for and then, like the most beautiful, the cleanest, let's keep it to clean, the cleanest area, and then whichever area is the cleanest, the city council provides an extra service to, like like something for a park or something for a whatever. So I'm just trying to think of how citizens can be motivated and what role sort of more privileged and well-serviced areas can play in getting less privileged areas sort of engaged in cleaning up their areas. That's what I had to say.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Those are excellent project suggestions with a wide metro scalability, and I think that if officials in the city heard that, they'd be quite enthusiastic and actually quite inspired, which really is a big part of citizen engagement, is actually trying to keep folks who work for the administration also kind of enthusiastic and interested in keeping innovative. So I do appreciate both of those ideas, and I 100% think that like you're really onto something there. We did see some of that twinning or pairing around the initial stages of lockdown with the community action networks, where people were trying to do a sort of a community-based outreach and working together with different neighborhoods. So I definitely think that idea wouldn't be a scary idea to submit, and not new in that it would make people wonder if it would work. Absolutely, twinning builds both empathy and more effective governance, because when you see things, you're likely to act on them. So I think that's very important. Thank you so much, Caroline. Those are both incredible suggestions. I really want to encourage you to submit those almost verbatim, as you've said, and shared with us. So thanks for the inspiration. Okay, so I'm going to quickly pop into the chat bar and have a look at some of the comments that have come out here. Nico, thank you so much for your submissions on LED street lighting. Really, really excellent suggestion. Something like that could easily turn into a KPI. So we spoke about how important that scorecard is. If the project is street lighting, then certainly the percentage of street lights converted to LED, which are definitely the best way forward in terms of electricity usage, and by extension carbon would work really, really well. Sorry, I'm just going to mute you there. Welcome to the chat though. And then safe streets, certainly something I'm very passionate about from an open streets point of view. I'll put some information in the document that we create as a base for you around some ideas around street safety, which you can choose from. Some of those are about safe streets for children, particularly to walk, but also just around a more gender sensitive approach to making safe public spaces that consider not only women or people who are gender neutral, but also people who are disabled or vulnerable in some way. So those are all excellent. And what I want to just encourage everyone is, if you have an idea that seems kind of obvious, maybe, or it's like, I'm sure someone thought of that, please don't hesitate to still submit those. It might be that there is somebody new in that department or in that directorate who would be assessing that idea or feels really passionate about that, and you might an idea that's been spoken about before might land on very enthusiastic ears. So by all means, still make comments, even though they may seem relatively obvious. Okay, so Nico has also mentioned, I want to just raise the issue of My City and the extension of the My City bus routes. I want to maybe just pass the mic over to Mikhail for a second and ask, Mikhail has quite a good knowledge of transport in the city generally, and also of the My City bus extension phase 2. Mikhail, do you want to just give us just a sense of where that phase 2 is running, and what how that might affect or is in proximity to Ward 59, if you don't mind me putting you on?
Yes, no, that's fine. Thank you so much, Kirsten, and Irvine, Caroline, and anyone else that has given input so far as well. Thank you very much. So just about My City, the N2 Express will be starting up quite soon again, which is a real, what's that word, relief, because there's been a lot of pressure on commuters and on the taxi system and on Golden Arrow to be able to make up that shortfall. What's happening with phase 2A, so that's connecting Mitchell's Plain and Khayelitsha to Claremont and Wynberg. Some of the construction has happened already. You'll see in Lansdowne, for example, is one of them, and in Epping is another one. And one of the biggest challenges is access to funding, because it comes in kind of tranches which are often smaller than the sort of cost of all of the construction. So the construction is going to be happening in pockets. And that's why you'll see, like, around a particular intersection, there'll be a whole bunch of work going on. Towards the end of the previous council term, we started approving there's the classic cat, nice. We started approving officials to begin to engage with the taxi associations in the Mitchell's Plain and Khayelitsha area, or along that route that are affected by the changes. But essentially what it's trying to do is trying to create dedicated roadways connecting those two neighborhoods or suburbs to Claremont and Wynberg, because those are two big public interchanges. And the bigger vision, admittedly, is difficult to achieve, but the bigger vision is that the train line works, the Southern Line works. And then, people then move from the MyCity bus on the Southern Line and then connect to their final destination, essentially. And you would then have smaller vehicles that then go into the suburbs of the southern suburbs. But just to kind of manage everyone's expectations, there is no plan for there to be a dedicated red road anywhere in the southern suburbs, because we have got the Southern Line. And the plan instead is for the city to, as quickly as possible, be able to actually fix the rail by getting the authority to do so from the national government. So now that's a lot of detail, and I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, thank you. I think that from a public transport point of view, my city is going to make quite a big difference in the sort of the southern portion of the metro, and I'm excited about that, because I do think that rollout has been a while in coming. Okay, so one or two other questions, and then we're going to move to just chatting a little bit about the neighborhood sessions, because I do want to let everyone know what the next opportunity is to have some conversations. Just a question on the chat bar. Mohammed mentioning, he says there's some concern around the deteriorating safety along Main Road in the vicinity of Cavendish Square. Taxi drivers have become unsafe, increasingly so. I think just better policing of bad driving will go a long way. So that is 100% a comment that the IDP can turn into something that can be a mechanism or a policy. My suggestion there is that there are more dedicated traffic officials and traffic policing in certain areas, like CBD areas, like Cavendish is definitely a business node. And so more regular policing would be really critical. One of the suggestions that we've made as Open Streets is for that section of Main Road to have a reduced speed limit, which would deter bad driving and be easier to police if everyone had to go at a snail's pace because of all the people walking there. But that's just from my side. But I certainly think that traffic enforcement in areas of public transport intensity like Main Road is absolutely a suggestion that has scalability across multiple different areas. Rondebosch Main Road is very similar. The whole of Plumstead, Belleville, the areas of people congestion and taxi congestion, which absolutely can have a plan and a measurable policy brought to bear. So thank you for that. Yeah, so everyone's agreeing there on the chat bar, not enough traffic police. 100% agree. I think one of the suggestions that I'm going to put to Mikhail is just the delegation of policing for me has always been a little bit tricky. That, you know, traffic police, you know, if traffic police see someone getting mugged, they're not going to chase the mugger because their job is traffic. You know what I mean? So I think with Metro Police and how we feel safe by is a really important topic, and I'd love for us to come back to that and make as many comments as we can. The more comments we make, better around safety in particular. And then John, I think John is your wife, Jill, might be Jill, just around the cycling and pedestrian network, particularly around subways and the railway line. The plan for safety until the rail network comes online and the chance of those spaces becoming derelict swathes of land for me as an urbanist are a very real concern. Oh, there, Jill, you're saying some Jill. Sorry, Jill, I saw you signed it. That is a real concern, and I think that's shared amongst many people. So if that is a comment that you feel strongly about, I'd love to encourage you to emphasize how important it is to have a proactive plan around managing rail spaces between now and Metro Rail or some kind of rail devolution coming online. Okay, so these are all absolutely excellent comments, and what I would like, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be collating these from the chat bar, itemizing them, and so this time next week you'll have a document to copy and paste from and create your submission email document, because all of these wonderfully succinct comments are already written for you, and you can simply choose the ones that you feel strongly about and send those off to the city. So we're already kind of halfway through a really beautiful submission document, I can see from just scrolling through the chat bar. Okay, but wait, there's more. So besides this session, which was really quite introductory, get involved, your comments are important, this is what the IDP is. What we wanted to do is to look at a series of sessions where we could chat about where you live and areas of concern in a little bit more detail. That subway issue is something particular that really would benefit from a little bit further discussion and possibly even a walk around. So, so what you can expect in the next week is the following. So tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, so I've literally copy pasted these invites that we made. So tomorrow, we are going to be at the Girl Guide Hall in Elmer Road at the same time tomorrow to have an in-person chat with some maps and looking a little bit more detail at things if you'd like to join us for that. We'd love you to be there. On Thursday, we're going to be at the Vineyard Hotel. And we're going to be discussing the Claremont Newlands area in a little bit more detail. And on Friday, we're going to be at the Kenilworth Methodist Church to do the same thing. So it's an opportunity to have a second round of discussions. If you want to add something that you feel maybe a bit street specific or a bit neighborhood specific, that's a great opportunity. And some people who are not as kind of digitally comfortable, who want to meet us in person, will be joining us at those sessions. Just as a caveat, COVID is very real, please get vaccinated. But if for any reason you feel that despite all of our efforts to be socially distanced and COVID compliant, that you'd like to meet in person, but an in-person session is not going to be for you, I really want to ask you to just have a look at the email address at the bottom, pop Mikhail a message and say, I'd like to show you this area. I'd love to go for a walk with you in that area, or I'd like to chat with you on email, and we'll make a plan. The idea is that everyone gets a chance to ask questions, have their say, and be facilitated to contribute to the IDP. And if an in-person session isn't for you, please don't stress. There are other options. So please, can you see if you'd like to join us for that session? I'm putting on that was my sock. Join us for one of those in-person sessions, and we would love to welcome you and chat with you a little bit more. We'll have some Koki pens, we'll have some maps. It'll be a little bit more kind of hands-on for those of us who are tactile learners. And we just want to give everyone an opportunity to express, learn, share, and hear as best as possible. With that said, there is a caveat. I do appreciate and apologize that the amount of time that we've had to do this has been very short. I would have loved to have invited more people and spread the net as wide as we can. But we're doing what we can with the time we have, and we hope that when we have another session in March, we'll have a lot more ability to reach further and discuss things in a deeper way. So thank you for working with us in this short time period that we've been presented with. Okay, so let me see if I've got anything else. No, that's it. Okay, so it is 7:24. We have Kenilworth Presbyterian Church. Thank you, Mikhail. I'm not sure that I know the Kenilworth Church too well, so I appreciate that might have been a typo there. Okay, I think that's it for me. If you'd like to contact me, Roland has put our details in the chat bar as well, info@OpenStreets. You can pop me a message. And I think at this stage, that's everything that I have to say, but I do want to ask if we've got time for one or two more questions before we wrap up. Does anyone have a question of clarity or anything else you'd like to contribute before we wrap? Any other questions? Please don't be shy. We can clap also, that's fine. Or if you want to eat and run dinner, that's great. Okay. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Please see our contact details in the chat bar if you want to reach out. We'll do our best. If I don't see you at the neighborhood session, please join Mikhail and I this time next week for the wrap-up session, where we'll share everything we've learned and give you that document so that you can copy paste that and send that to the city. Mikhail, I'm going to ask you to say a quick goodbye before we wrap up, and then we can all go and eat dinner. Mikhail?
Sorry, because I'm not sure if you were prompting me. It kind of broke up quite a bit there. Okay, cool. All right, just a very quick thank you very much to everyone, and I'm really looking forward to seeing each of you in Alma Road, the Vineyard Hotel, and at the Kenilworth Presbyterian Church. My apologies for that error, Kirsten, about calling it the Methodist Church initially. And then just the last thing to say is please do invite all of your neighbors to come to those sessions. All of those sessions are open to anyone, but they sort of maps that will be there, they are geared specifically towards the residents that live in the particular area. So that I and Kirsten can walk away with sort of detail of what can be looked at in each specific area. But yeah, in short, thank you so much and have a good evening. Goodbye.
All right. Thank you all. Thanks, Mikhail. Thanks, team. Have a good evening.